A group of former U.S. intelligence agents is urging President Obama to take action and defuse the crisis in Ukraine. For example, they recommend to listen to advisors other than the likes of John Kerry, whom they believe are giving Obama a one-sided picture of what's happening in Ukraine. Let's now talk to one of the people behind these recommendations, is Larry Johnson, a former CIA and State Department employee. Thank you so much, Mr. Johnson, for joining us here on T International. Well, have you heard any response from the U.S. President's office yet?
Nothing, and I think they're going to ignore us because this has a momentum of its own in the United States as far as the policy that the Obama administration is trying to pursue, and I guess I'll call it the agitators for conflict that are rife right now within the United States, unfortunately.
Well, you say that Obama should listen to people other than the likes of John Kerry. Why do you think this is so important?
Well, this has been, I'm a veteran of the Cold War. I was there throughout. I was at the Central Intelligence Agency as working in the Central America back when we saw the Soviet Union at the time as trying to subvert democracy and insert its influence there. And as we recall, the United States fought back very, very significantly in trying to prevent that. So, I don't come at this as someone who's naive or uninformed. But what I see now is I think, we really have entered a different period of history. And instead of accepting what's new in the world, we've got a lot of folks in the United States, both Republicans and Democrats, who are trying to resurrect the language and images of the Cold War and portray Russia today as just basically, the Soviet Union bound on world domination. And it's just nonsense. And so what we're trying to see is if we can help shift the debate and get a rational discussion about it. I mean, the fact of the matter is, in the United States, the average American doesn't appreciate the fact that by us trying to expand NATO and Western Europe and onto the borders of Russia, that would create some concerns. I've always tried to explain to people, I said, how would we react in the United States if Russia, in turn, was fostering a very close relationship with Mexico, and the Mexican government decided that it wanted to have a closer relationship with Russia than Washington, and in turn was going to start putting troops in Mexico? Well, you can imagine the outrage and the furor that would erupt in the United States. So it's just that we tend to try to portray these things in a way that doesn't really take into account the full dynamics that are involved. And I think it's very dangerous because the kind of language and rhetoric that's being used and some of the recommendations afoot in Washington are proposing arming Ukrainian dissidents, and we really have no idea even who some of those people are.
Well,
so I
Mr.
think
Johnson,
it's a dangerous time, and our...
Yeah, sorry for interrupting you. Well, speaking of recommendations, I mean, you have come up with a series of recommendations and pieces of advice for the president, specifically disavowing any wish to make Ukraine a member of NATO. How likely is it that the president will actually, listen to you and follow your advice?
Candidly, I think it's unlikely. Unfortunately, President Barack Obama is such a weak person right now. And he's not thinking strategically, and he really doesn't have a clear understanding of what the interests of the United States are. And so he's trying to fend off the political critics. Now, there is a very strong element in the United States which is pushing for really almost a confrontation with Russia over the Ukraine. And they haven't really thought through, because when they talk about arming the dissidents or arming the folks opposing Russia in the Ukraine, they don't appreciate the possibility of the escalation that can create. And so I think what you have is a situation in which President Obama is being hit from the right, and he's sort of stumbling on the left. And it's unfortunate, because instead of having a clear idea of where our interests lie, one other thing we didn't put in the letter, but I probably would have added, is that both Russia and the United States share a very common interest in trying to contain the spread of radical Sunni Islam in the world. And in fact, I think Russia's played an important role in that regard in Syria. But the United States seems to be having almost a split personality on the issue.
All right, Larry Johnson, former CIA and State Department employee, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and concerns with us here on RT International.